We're live. Another episode of Stuck in the Middle podcast.
I'm AK.
Sir Hans.
Sir Hans.
Man, you been missing, man.
Back, man.
Back like you never left. Yeah, man.
We got to figure out this whole thing. Or this thing that you just disappear like this, and you come back. But it's all good. You know what I mean? We all busy every now and then.
Yeah, under the radar.
Under the radar, huh? Hey, listen. Today's Saturday, right? So most people might be wondering why we're recording on Saturday. And, like we always said, most of our guests, some of them come from out of town, some of them they in town. And, we try to accommodate everybody, the best way we know how, the best way, we could work with them and stuff like that. So today's about to be really lit. We're about to learn a couple of things that most people, sit day to day and think about. The difference between, being African and African American. Well, not really a difference, but just, a personal perspective.
The everyday life.
Yeah,
the day-to-day,
the day to day. So with no further ado, he is a program coordinator at Penn Center for Minority Serving Institutions. And the topic for today will be the African American experience going from a historical black college to black college or university to an Ivy League institution. And he's no other than Will Anyu.
Bros.
Thank you.
English passion for reader.
Listen, man. Our visions are not the same, okay?
Will Anyu in the building, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Why you gotta be extra?
I'm glad to be here.
Yo,
welcome to the pod.
Welcome
man.
to the pod, man.
Thanks for inviting me on.
It's been a long time coming. We've been talking about, making this possible for the longest.
Yeah, man. I'm just trying to get on y'all's schedule, man.
We're trying to get on your schedule. Look, we're recording on a Saturday.
Just waiting for my name to be called. Like the draft pick.
Like a draft pick.
Well, welcome, man. We're in a couple drafts now.
Man. Well, let's get into it, right? Who's Will Anyu? Tell us.
Who's Will Anyu? That's a question I ask myself every day. I would say somebody that, works and strives every day to not only make his life better, but to work toward creating a better future for his family and the people who have become like family around him. In a nutshell, I would say that's who Will Anyu is.
Where did you grow up in?
So I was born in Bafoussam in Cameroon.
Bro?
Yeah, you should know this.
Nah, I ain't know that.
I was born in Bafoussam in Cameroon. The first couple years of my life, as you all know, I spent with our late grandmother, Grandma Lucy, prior to moving to the States. And moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, of all places. Why Africans go from the sub-Sahara climate to as cold as can be, still don't understand. But yeah, so I grew up in Minneapolis, and popular to contrary believe, Minneapolis is not filled with nothing but white people. It's actually a Caucasian,
huge,
my brother. Caucasian.
My
apologies, Caucasian. People.
Political correctness.
It's actually a huge hub for not only people of color, but also international people. So you have a large consortium there of West Africans, East Africans, Asians, Eastern Europeans, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, how you came here with mad young though, I think.
Yeah, so I came to the States when I was about 6.
Are you still in touch with that's mad young? Are you still in touch with that as far as you look up what's happening back in Cameroon, or you just man, I'm out of that and I'm out of mind, out of sight, out of
Nah, brother, that's where I'm from. And for a long time, especially growing up here and being detached from my African roots, quote unquote, I bear that side of me. And that's something a lot of people don't know. I was ashamed to be African. I was ashamed because the community that I grew up in, it was looked upon as a negative perspective, right? It was looked upon as, Africans are dirty, they're savages. All we see is when we watch TV, we see flies flying around their heads.
Yeah.
They live in trees. They raise tigers and monkeys. The first lion or tiger I ever saw was at the Como Zoo, Minneapolis when I first got here.
Bro, facts, yo.
And so for a very long time, I hid that. I haven't went as far as creating a completely alter ego. I started telling everybody that, I was an African. I grew up in St. Louis. Why St. Louis of all places? You asked me, I don't know. At the time, it sounded like a good idea. But I believed to myself that if I could create this alter ego, I could assimilate with quote-unquote African American culture, and that's what was around me. And so I did this as a coping mechanism, not even a coping mechanism, but a defense mechanism to enable myself to feel like I was wanted and I was able to be in a space where people actually cared about who I was, not realizing that I was giving up a gift that most would kill for.
Yeah, like go ahead.
That's crazy because like I didn't know you came in and that's so young, because every time when we interacted, like I was like, this guy, you seem so detached, like culturally, you know. And I was wondering, I was like, now that you're saying that you came here so young, I could understand why, like you could be so detached.
Because I remember, because I'm not just sure, but I remember growing up, you know, we always hung, you know, where was hung around. It was so funny, you know. I mean, we have a picture, you know, in the house where, you know, we're like really, you know, we're really little. And at that time, really, you know, thinking back, I don't even remember taking that picture. You feel me? So, So I don't remember nothing that was really going on at that time. All I remember was, you know, we used to just fight a lot and all whatnot. You know, that
we didn't really fight. We just picked on him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we picked on Riff like the little man, you know.
Yeah.
That's what went on?
Yeah, that's what went on, you know.
I hated their guts, man. I hated it. I still hate that picture because I'm not in it. But yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
bad memories.
like you moved here, Minnesota, with fam or?
So, prior to coming here, as you all know, I never knew my mother. And so growing up, the only two parents I really knew were Grandma Lucy and Grandpa Ernest. And like to me, like that was my mother and my father, because hell, I didn't know no better. Can I cuss on here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So I didn't know any better, and so like coming here, meeting my mother for the very first time. Well, the very first time that I can recollect, it was difficult, right? Because like you're coming to. Not only you come into a completely different culture, you're leaving everything that you know, love, and ever foresaw behind. And not to mention, they painted this picture that America is this beautiful place with riches, the roads are paved with gold. And then you get here and it's like, yo, this is pretty trash. Like, send me back. Like, my grandparents had a compound. We had servants. Like, I had people that, like, waited to me. And you telling me that we're poor and now I have to, like, wait for myself? And so it was difficult. It was really difficult, but you know, over time, you know,
you adjust.
You adjust.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, did you? I want to like touch your high school experience a little bit, because you know, like I knew you.
I didn't even have to like wait for him to get to that point. Like the very start, like kindergarten.
Yeah, kindergarten.
Yeah.
So
at 6, kindergarten.
I guess I can go through from when I started school to right before I started college.
Because you're very academical. Right?
Yeah, so and it's funny because I used to be I used to be horrible at school. I remember first and second grade, first, second, and third grade, I hated it. Used to come home crying every single day because I used to be picked on because I had a real thick African accent, and you know I was a really skinny kid with a lopsided head. So like I used to be picked on a lot, and you know over time as I buried more and more of my culture away, you know I assimilated to what you know some people would foresee as you know a regular African American kid, and so after a while, you know I started making friends. I started learning a little bit more about myself, but something in high school. So, back up a little bit. So, when I first started high school, all my friends went to this high school called Edison High School, and then, but because of where my house was, like in Minneapolis, like the school map, like everything is like mapped out. So, depending on where you live, that's the high school you go to.
Yeah.
So, at the time, I went to North High School, which was by far one of the worst high schools in Minnesota, period. It might have been in the United States. And it wasn't like, don't get me wrong, like there were people there that cared about you, but it was a heavily infested gang area. it was a lot of issues. And so about 2 months into my freshman year, an incident happened where my a couple friends and I were going to get some money from a friend's mom to go buy McDonald's or something, and this dude that I went to middle school with, that was not our high school, like rolled up on us, like gripped everybody up. And when I went to grip him up, I mean, I'm thinking we cool. My man sucker punched me, and I fell to the ground. And back then I had a little bit of an anger problem, so I'm getting up ready to fight, and all I see in front of me is a 8-chamber revolver.
Oh.
And he basically told me, like, yeah, I heard you the one that snitched on me, because at this point he got expelled for selling weed in school. He was like, this has been a long time coming, whoop-de-whoop. And, by the grace of God, one of my friends hit him from the back. The gun fell. He grabbed it, tossed it, and, like, we took off. And in a sequence of events, my mother got me out that school and, like, literally shipped me off to the other side of the city, to Minneapolis, Roosevelt. And Roosevelt was where, like, I really started finding who I was. And to go back to the question that was stated earlier about, losing your culture and so forth and so on, I remember one time a counselor pulled me to the side, and a lot of people don't know my full name is Nade Willie Anyu. And so he was like, what does your name mean? And I was like, I don't know. He was like, what do you mean by you don't know? I was like, I don't know. So he was like, you need to find out what your name means, because you have a gift that a lot of people will kill for. Like, you actually know where your family's from. And because, African Americans were brought here as slaves, and they were detached away from their culture and their family, like, you have a lot of people walking around here that when you tell you about their history, as far back as most of them can go is slavery. And you have such a rich culture, and you don't have to you don't have
shy
to
away from that.
Shy away from that. You need to embrace that. And so that's when I really started doing my searching, and that's when I really started embracing my culture more. And that's when I really started understanding the gift that I had.
Mm-hmm. You been back since?
I have not.
You plan on it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Listen, with everything going on right here, I might be taking a trip back sooner than later.
Yeah, man, I want to touch on just skip forward, because I've known you to be vocal about. You just mentioned with everything going on out here, and we're gonna backpedal. How you feel about because you've been vocal online about the political state in the United States right now. Where's your mind at as far as there, and where you are as a person right now?
With the outturn of the election, with everything that's been going on, I'm not gonna lie, I was really upset, especially, just different things that have been happening in my life and in the people who I call close around me's lives in this past year and some change. And I was very upset about it, but a friend said something to me that has stuck with me. He was like, as bad as the situation is, we've been in worse, right? Because if you go back and you look at the Nixon era, you look at the Reagan era, you look at even the Clinton's era, you had mass incarceration, you had the war on drugs, you had, you name it. Trump is bad, but we've had bad before, and we were able to rise from that and move forward. And as I see everything going on, especially what's going on in Charlottesville right now, it's upsetting, but we've been here before, right?
Right.
This is no different than what happened in the 60s with Dr. King and the civil rights movement, right? This is no different than what happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s with the riots in LA, the killing of the Black Panther movement, and so forth and so on. History is always bound to repeat itself, because we're placed in situations where you're forced to either assimilate yourself with what's going on or rise above it. And right now, I think the best thing that we can do is rise above all this hate, all this turmoil, and show our country, because regardless of where any of us are from, America is our country, right? Because you had the people that say, oh, this is our country, this, that, and the third. They took that from the Native Americans. You have people who have come here and in order to create better lives for not only themselves but for their families as well. And so in regards to that, all this is our country, our cult, all the beauty about America is it's a combination of various cultures,
Diverse cultures, yeah.
ethnic groups, races, and it's beautiful, right? Because when you're able to bring all these things in together, I don't say blend because you have to be careful in regards to the context of that word, but when you're able to bring all these groups together, you're able to create something beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's 100, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so far, you know, with education and stuff, you've been able to attain, you know, great, you know, in your life, right? I can say greater heights. You know, you've been places where you never thought you would be. I mean, you planned on that, but, you know, the way life is, you didn't really think you would be there. You know, you worked in the White House, right? You interned in the White House. Tell us a little bit about that, you know. How did it come about? You know,
So,
And how was that experience and everything? Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that if I want something, I'll find a way to get it, and not to say that in a cocky sense, or not to sound arrogant, but I really believe that, you know, opportunity is for those who go out and get it, not those who wait for it to come to you, right? So, in the summer of 2014, I was working for a group called the Children's Defense Fund, and it's an organization that basically works with summer literacy for inner city kids to help them keep what they've learned during the school year into the next school year. Because studies have shown that during the 3 months of summer, a lot of the knowledge and a lot of the things that students learn, they lose that, and so when they go back to school, they're a step behind. And so that's something that's really close and strong to my heart. As you all know, education is extremely important to me, and so I was working with the organization, and we have this national training in Nashville, Tennessee. Excuse me. We have this national training in Nashville, Tennessee, and as part of the training, one thing we have every night is a speaker, and these speakers, they come from all different fields, from education to law to policy to the like business. I mean, you name it. And so one of our speakers was David Johns. David Johns was the former executive director for the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. It was an initiative. It's a mouthful. It was an initiative that was created by past President Barack Obama in regards to not only focusing on education of one group of African Americans, but African Americans as a whole. And so as he spoke and as he was just talking about what he did, like the whole time I'm saying like, yo, I need to go work for him. Like, I need to intern for him. Like, I need to do something to be in the position to, like, work for this man, because what he's talking about is exactly what I want to do with my life. And so after the speech, like, one thing I've never been shy of, I don't care if you're a bum on the street to President Obama himself, like, if I want to speak to you, like, I'm going to make it a point to introduce myself. And so I want to introduce myself to him. And, you know, I was like, I love the work you do. It's, you know, it's crazy because as you spoke, like, I felt like you were speaking about my life, and I felt like you were speaking about, you know, the struggles that I've been through. And like, I would just love the opportunity to come work for you. And so he was like, okay. So he gave me his card and he was like, email me. What David didn't know was I'm not one of those people that I'm going to email you once or twice, and if you don't answer, I'm going to let it be. No, I'm going to email you a billion times so you email me back.
He probably gave you that just like, all right,
yeah, so I literally was emailing him every week, like once a week. And so finally he was like, you know, I've been busy because the work he does, like he travels all around the country, the world, like doing this work, right? And so he put me in contact with his deputy director, and she got in contact with me about doing an interview. And I'm like terrified, right? Because like this is not like just no local group. Like this is they've had past interns from Harvard, UC Berkeley, Stanford, Yale, Columbia, like these huge schools with these very reputable schools. And I'm just kid coming from North Carolina Central University, not really understand the value of my institution, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But you know, like I'm like, you know, I'm never gonna get this. But one thing I've always been told was, and this is something that, you know, our late grandmother Lucy always told me. She was like, you know, if you want something, you need to fight for it.
Right.
And so when I interviewed, like I was passionate. I didn't have all the right answers. I didn't have, the proper skill set or whatever, but I was like, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to do whatever is necessary and needed to do this, right?
So what kind of jobs did you do there? Like what were you responsible for there?
So we did a lot around advocacy for people of color. And so one of the briefs that I worked on was because, as you all know, there's a large disparity in the African American community in regards to education and criminal justice. And so during President Obama's term, one of the big things that he was working on was getting more inmates that have been now freed the education that they so rightfully deserve. And so one of the biggest briefs that I worked on was basically creating a consortium of what programs are currently out there, how can we help these programs, and also what research says about basically reforming people back into society. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things I worked on. We also worked in collaboration with the White House Initiative on historically black colleges and universities. And so I worked with they have this national conference every year, the HBCU All-Stars. So we help with their conference in regards to, making sure that the right students, making sure that the students who were picked for this conference, like they were well taken care of in regards to housing, in regards to food, in regards to and then also like helping them understand like the landscape of how important their institutions were and like the reasonings why these institutions were placed forth. And then we also did some work with community colleges. We did some work with tribal colleges. We did some work with Hispanic serving institutions. And so it was just like
it's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. And all of that was like in I want to say like a summer's worth.
No, it was 6 months. So it was from about August. We started in August. I started in August, and I ended like late December of 2015.
You still involved, like in contact with
Yeah, so I still stay in contact with David and the staff that were there.
How's it now for them? Like, have funding for them?
So I haven't. So in regards to that, I can't really speak on that because I don't have no knowledge of what's happened to. So with all the initiatives, there's signed executive orders, and so each president, when they come into a new term, they can decide to get rid of it or they can decide to keep it.
Trump probably done got rid of that joint.
Yeah,
I can't say for sure because I haven't. Again, David's an extremely busy individual, so I haven't spoken to him in a while. Mm-hmm. But I hope it's still there because it's very much needed.
Yeah, that joint is needed.
All that is great, right? Mm-hmm. But let's take it back. Mm-hmm. Let's take it back because we fast forward all the way, and we're really missing the purpose of you really being here. Mm-hmm. And growing up, right? Mm-hmm. You came from Africa at the age of 6. Mm-hmm. It was a lot hard it was a lot hard for that transition, right? To go from being African, to adapt into the African American ways of things. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about, that transition. Like, how were you able to cope? What mechanisms did you use to, adapt to the Western world?
So, popular contrary belief, people who come from Africa and people who are African American or Black American, we're not that much different.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what country you go to in this world, the black person or the person with a darker pigmented skin is always put at the bottom of society, right? And so, if nothing else, that's one thing that we're able to connect at, right? And if there's one thing that both black people, and by black people I mean African Americans, generational African Americans in this country, and Africans have in common is resiliency. Like, we've been through a lot. Mm-hmm. Whether it's with slavery or whether it's with colonization, we've been through a lot. And so if nothing else, we can bond at that same level. Not to mention, when I walk outside, when people look at me, they don't look at me, oh, that's an African boy right there. No, they look at me, that's a black man.
Right.
Point blank print.
Right.
And honestly and truthfully, Like that's what they see, and that's who I am. And so there's a term that Dr. W.B. Du Bois coined a long time ago called double consciousness, and basically the idea behind that is being having two consciousnesses in one person, right? So being black, being an African American, and then still understanding like who you are and the importance of who you are, right? And so there's a term that, honestly and truthfully, I don't really know where I got it from, but it speaks a lot to me. It's called African Americanism.
Right.
And what it basically means is I'm African born, but I'm African American raised. And so for me, that's something because, yeah, both my biological parents are Cameroonian. But my environment, my community, where I grew up, was not really Cameroonian. In my house, yeah, it was. But outside of the confines of my home, everything I knew was black culture. Mm-hmm. And so, with that being said, like, it really wasn't hard for me to understand this culture, because I can sympathize with it, because going back to it, like, I've dealt with racism, and not racism in the sense that, oh, you're African and so I should treat you badly. Not racism in the sense of you're black, you're not white, you're not Caucasian, and so that's why I'm treating you this way. And we have our own quarrels in regards to, how black people may feel about Africans or how Africans may feel about black people. But at the end of the day, we're all one people. Mm-hmm. We all come from the same family, the same house. We just grew up in different places. Right.
Is there any upside to to the African Americanism that it's like, yo, this is the beauty of that, as far as the opposite side of racism and things of that nature that you've experienced as well.
So,
I know you it's not a Q.
Brother, don't disrespect me. I have a problem, bro. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
So, things like that, the I don't know, like the ball, the opposite side of the dark side of being black in America. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right, it's an analogy I like to use, right? So, if you have a pack of lions, and with lions, only one lion can be like the leader, the male, and there's only one male in each pack, and the other males are like segregated off. And so what happens was the ones that are segregated off, they'll come, they'll challenge like that headline, the alpha line or whatever, to basically gain his place, right? And that's how I see racism. Because if you look at the history of colonization, why were we colonized? Because you had people that came from one area of the world and they came to another area and they saw things that they could never have imagined, they could never have seen. Because if we go back in history, before Africa became what we know today as Africa, you had the ancient Egyptian cultures, you had Kemet, you had the Moors, and you had these people that were far advanced. Like, have you ever thought about how in Egypt you have like these humongous statues, but they had no skyscrapers back then. They had no cranes or none of these different mechanical instruments to like build these things, right? Mm-hmm. And like the word, like even when you look at universities, the first university is in Timbuktu. And the reason they call it's derived from the word universitat, which means the study of the skies. And the reason, like, you had the conquerors, you had people that came from other nations. They wanted knowledge for themselves, so they came in. They befriended the natives. They stole their culture, and then they burned it to the ground. That's what happened with a lot of the ancient Egyptian libraries. Like, the knowledge was brought, it was taken, and then they burned it to the ground so nobody else could take it. And so, like, that's how I see racism. So when somebody's racist towards me, or they look at me like I am lesser than, it's because you wish you were me. Like, even think about black culture today. You got people praising the big butts now. Like that's the thing. Like where did that derive from? That was a slave that was brought from Africa that was put on display because it was something that the white man had never really seen, and they were so fascinated by it that they wanted it. Or you have people with these new locks or whatnot, and they're like, oh, this is the new hippest fashion. Like where did that come from? And so when you look at popular culture, a lot of these things are things that have been stolen from our culture. And when I say our culture, I mean both as Africans and both as African Americans.
I want to like touch on like you speak in bars, by the way, on as far as you as a person personally. What are the in living in an African house or a home and being raised quote unquote in the streets or like school African Americanism? What are like the upsides of that? You know what I'm saying? Like the you know what I mean? Like where I'm trying to get to is like what are the, as far as your experiences, the best parts of that?
I get the best of both worlds.
That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? As like past racism.
I get the best of both worlds because at home I can dine on I chew soup. I can eat jama. I can eat I can meet the chief of our wing and know that my bloodline is tied to him, right? And so I can gain that rich history. Outside my home, I can learn about Marcus Garvey, Dr. King, Malcolm X.
Having both of both worlds.
Duke Ellington, learn about all these, Booker T. Washington. Learn about all these people that were literally given scraps. But look what they've been able to build.
Right.
So in regards to your question, man, I really feel like I am blessed because not only do I granted the African American experience is something that I've had to adopt, but that's as much my family as my paternal family. You feel me?
Yeah.
I really feel like I get the best of both worlds in that regards.
Yeah. So education, right? Coming up is not something that you were best at. Your words, right? So what actually got you into education to be where you are right now?
Like prior to the pod, you say you had 2 degrees, working on your third right now. Like what was your first joint, the second joint, and what are you working on right now? Yeah.
Well, so I received my bachelor's and my master's from, in my regards, the best HBCU in the land, North Carolina Central University, home of the Flying Eagles. I received my, no shade to the Eastern Shore, but it's better. But so I received my first degree in communication. I received my my master's in public administration, and I'm currently about to embark on my doctorate in higher education. And so, why education? Education saved my life. So growing up in Minneapolis, my freshman year, the reason why I moved from North High to Roosevelt is because somebody literally saw it upon themselves to kill me because they did something that they foresaw that I did something that I didn't actually do.
Right.
My sophomore year, a friend was coming back from working late, got in the middle of a Vatos Locos and Lane King fight and was stabbed to death. My junior year, we're at basketball practice at about 6:15 in the morning. All our phones started ringing. I heard that one of my friends was coming out of a barbershop and got 36 bullets unleaded in him. My senior year, another friend was coming back from Arkansas and was she was on the passenger side, was hit by a drunk semi-driver, died on impact. And my freshman year, going into my sophomore year, 2 weeks before I left Minnesota and transferred to NCCU, one of my best friends, who was like a brother to me, was killed in a car accident. And so leaving Minneapolis, leaving the school I was at, Mankato State at the time, and transferring to NCCU literally saved my life. And when I got to NCCU, I found out about a program called the Centennial Scholars Program. And this program, in lack of better words, was literally created for people like me, for students that didn't really excel in high school, in academia, but this was like our second chance. So it was almost like a sports team, but our sport of choice was academics. And so like it was students who had never, prior to this point, I had never seen, I didn't even know what a 3.0 looked like. But like, I'm a very competitive person, So how I used to be competitive in basketball and football, I turned that to academics. So if my man getting a 3.0, I'm getting a 3.2. Or if my man getting a 3.5, I'm getting a 3.8. If he making a 3.8, you better be damn sure I'm making that 4.0. And so like that was the mentality that I started. And this was when things started to change for me in regards to actually like, you know, taking my academics seriously. And so through that program, like I found worth in myself, right? I went from, you know, just trying to make it by in Minnesota without dying to like thriving in NCCU, like actually seeing a future for myself and actually seeing that, you know, I can be greater than what my environment and my society around me wanted me to be.
Man, like, you just said Minnesota. In my head, I was thinking, I'm like, because every time I hear Minnesota, the only thing I think about is cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine Minnesota being bad. Like, you know, people, you know, like threatening people's lives and all whatnot. Like other places such as Chicago or whatever.
Yeah, brother.
You feel me? So
at one point, Minneapolis was in the top 20 most dangerous cities to live in Minneapolis in the United States. And I believe it was in 2009. We were number 12 on the list.
that is crazy.
Where you at now, as far as like where you
I
live?
don't know. I
Now?
haven't checked in a while. I should look.
I'm saying, where do you live now?
Oh, so I currently live in Philadelphia.
Philly. Man, Philly, dog. Like, Philly's another city, man. Like, it's another, dude.
What do you do out
He
in
live
Philly?
in the guts.
What do you
Philly,
do out in
man.
Philly?
So I am blessed enough to work for the Penn Center for Minority Service Institutions, seated at the University of Pennsylvania.
It is sponsoring your doctor they're going to?
So one of the great things about working for Penn is the benefits.
Yeah,
and
man.
so one of the great benefits is that because I'm a full-time employee, they also pay for my school.
Sheesh.
My man said they gave him a brand new MacBook Pro. Like, where to do that at?
Let me hold your old one.
So that's what you doing your master at Penn?
I'm not doing my master's, I'm doing my doctorate.
I mean, your
Yeah,
doctorate at
doctor,
Penn.
yeah. Don't degrade the man. It's like,
Put some respect on the name. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So you work with students, right?
So not necessarily. So our center, we work with minority service institutions.
Okay.
And so minority service institutions are federally designated institutions that serve a certain population of students. So you have historically Black colleges and universities, such as the one I went to. You have Hispanic serving institutions. You have tribal colleges, and you have ANAPISIs, which are Asian Pacific Islander serving institutions. And so we do a lot of work with bringing advocacy to them. We do a lot of work with working with their students, staff, and faculty and presidents to basically create better environments and education for like the institution and the student body as a whole.
where do you want to take your story, your education, everything that you know? Where do you want to take it? Like AK will always say, you in like 5 years. Like, I don't know.
me in
Not
5
5 years, but I'm saying like down the road, because you're still a youngin', you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where do I want to take it? I want to give back. I feel like, you know, I was incredibly blessed to be where I'm at. And, you know, I'm still receiving blessings. But there are a lot of people that grew up in the same situation that I grew up in that don't have these opportunities. And so right now I'm trying to decide if I want to be, you know, if I want to go toward the faculty route and be a professor, or if I want to go work in government, or if I want to take my talents to the private sector. I don't know, but in
Take my time.
in
Okay, LeBron.
in some way, like I have to give back to my community, man. And like, I mean, when I say my community, you know, it goes back to not only my African American community, but also to my African community, right? Because like there are a lot of people that they deserve a chance, they deserve a helping hand, and none of us got to where we're at by ourselves. Like somebody had to lift us up. There's a movie that came out like back in the 90s called Paid Forward. And the whole premise of the movie is if I do something good to you, you have to go out and do something good for somebody else. And that's how I live my life. Like I've been incredibly blessed. I've been incredibly gifted with things that, you know, some people can only dream about. And there's something that myself and my best friend, we always love to say, like, at our worst days, there are people that we know that would kill for that. And so, like, that's something that I just walk with every day. Like, no matter how bad things may get, like, there's somebody out there that would kill to be in my position.
Dang, that's really deep. You know, that's facts though. You feel me? That's really facts. But you mentioned something about being in Minneapolis, while somebody literally like threatening your life and seeing all these bad things and all whatnot. I have two questions. So we just recently, last month, was it last month? Yeah, we did, a forum on mental health, right? Speak a little bit on, seeing all of that. Like how did that affect you mentally? And how were you able to, get over that to actually be where you are right now?
Mentally. So, as black people specifically, we have this idea, and when I say black people in this context, I mean everybody that like sees themselves as black, whether you're African American, from the continent, from the island, so forth and so on. We have this stigma that when you have issues, you keep it to yourself, or you leave it in the family, and that doesn't really get worked out. And like generationally, like we've been built in that sense, so we don't really seek out help. And so one of the biggest things that I've now become an advocate for is therapy. And not necessarily in the sense that, I'm going crazy, or I just need somebody to talk to, or I need to go talk about my problems. Like, no, sometimes, like, and yeah, it's great to talk to your boys, your girls. I mean,
you just need
your
somebody
family.
confiding.
It's nice, but sometimes it's good to talk to somebody that's actually like trained to do this, right? Because you can tell me about an issue that's going on. I can tell you like how, like the best of my knowledge of how I would attack that situation, but that's not my field. Like that's not what I've been trained in. And so like I think it's important that like we seek out help, right? Because like I've seen a lot of situations that could have been avoided if somebody had just like received the proper help that they needed.
Right.
I would like just sort of cut you short, but like that's so true because we as humans like to talk about ourselves a lot. Like if I come to you with a problem, or if you come to me reverse, if you came to me like, yo, like this is what I'm going to, I would be like, man, like talk about myself more, as opposed to like just listening and giving you. So like training people who are trained. I agree with that.
No, like I'm telling you, whether you feel like you're about to go off the ledge, or whether you just like got some issues that you want to work out, like I am a strong advocate of therapy.
So my other question, which is not, it has nothing to do with mental health, is, touch a little bit about, coming from Africa, adopting, the Western world and stuff, and actually finding your roots back to Africa. You feel me? Like, cause I remember, when we started, like, when the Afro beats came out, everybody was like heavy, like all the Africans was heavy on it, right? And African Americans just sitting there looking like, yo, what is this? So they finally, gradually started, having an ear for that sound, and most of them are, gravitating towards it, So speak on how you were able to actually find your roots back to the African culture.
There's a quote that says that in order to work towards your future, you have to know where you come from. And what I take from that is what we're going through right now, and like this is answering your question but diverting away from it. What we're going through right now, we're not the first people to have like gone through this. Like in regards to finding my culture, so last year, and this is when like I really got deep into like wanting to know and learn more. Last year at your sister's wedding, being able to go to the knock door, being able to, even call Eddie or Augustin and, mess them like, in order to marry my sister, you need to send me 3 goats, 5 chickens, $10,000. And, like, this is the things that we joke about, but like in our culture, like this is something that actually happens, right?
Yeah.
And so like, being able to like, even with the Schwabi and be like, this is my family's cloth and this, that, and the third, like, and I brought one of my friends with me, and like, she was just amazed by it.
Right.
And so like, I'm looking here like, damn, for so many years, I tried my hardest to get away from this. For so many years, I literally worked tooth and nail to like, bury this. Not realizing like, this is richer than gold. And so like that was my turning point, man. Like it really just impressed upon me that like, I need to know who I am. I need to know where my family's from. I need to start asking questions. And it's to the point now when people ask me, when they used to ask me, Will, what are you? I'm like, oh, I'm black. No, when they ask me, I'm Cameroonian first and foremost, because like that's where I was born. That's where my family's from. That's where my culture is from. Yeah, I'm American in the sense that, you know, like this is where I'm at, but culturally, that's where I'm at, and you know, like culturally, like that's where, like Africa is the cradle of civilization, and so to be able to push something like that away, like that's something that I'm upset with myself that didn't start earlier. So if that answers your question,
No, yeah, definitely. Let's switch a little. We had something to say.
No.
Let's switch a little bit to, you know, a little game called Rapid Fire, right? And, you know, don't think about this question. Just answer, you know, the very first thing that pops to mind, right? Yeah. All right,
In
cool.
3 or less words.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. So, Will Anyu in 5 years?
Dr. Will Anyu, first and foremost.
All right.
Okay.
All right, that's the answer. Okay.
In 5 years, I mean, in 5 years, I should be done my program, change agent, advocate, and working for the people.
Okay. Giving back to the community. What is the very first thing that comes to mind? Like, what do you want to do for the community?
Educational competence.
Man, we're going to have to define those terms later on after the pod. But, you know, you know what I mean? In terms of family, right? No, in terms of just everything, what's the best thing that happened to you?
What's the best thing that happened to me? Damn, I only got 3 words for that.
Nah, you can stretch it however you want.
Life, man.
Life.
Like, you know, going back
Having
to,
that second chance, they whipped out that Glock on you or whatever it
having a
was.
second, third, fourth, like, brother, when I tell you that the person that you see in front of you, like, I have gone through a major transformation, and I don't deserve to be here, but, you know, the man upstairs saw it fit that he has a bigger plan for me than I had for myself, that I am here today to, you know, have this conversation. So, like, the greatest gift that I've had thus far is life.
So what, you know what I'm saying, like, and you do this all day as far as like a job is concerned. But for somebody listening to this pod right now, they don't heard your story, and like it's a little, you know, there's like what advice for somebody who, you know, is from both worlds, Africa or even African American, because this thing is on Facebook right now.
Yeah.
It's
Iraq.
like, Iraq, you know what I mean? Like, what you want them to take away from this?
I want them to take away that your current reality doesn't have to be your permanent situation. And what I mean by that is no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, where you're at right now, you don't have to stay there forever. The greatest gift that, and you know, for everybody, and not to push my religion on anybody, but you know, I'm Christian, and the greatest gift that God gave us was free will. And no matter what your situation is, you have the power to change it. Whether it's taking small steps to get to a bigger step, or whether it's taking one major step, we all have the power to change our current situations. And so with that being said, man, like, decide what you want for your life and fight like hell to get it.
Yeah. A lot of people, you know, these days, they view education as a struggle, like, I want to say a very far journey. You know, like leaving here to go to Africa, people are like, man, I'm about to be in a plane for 23 hours or however long it is, right? So to find different routes, you know, to attain success. Some people do crash courses and all whatnot. What's your take on actually having a degree versus doing a crash course? Being that you're so heavy on education.
All right, and for me, this is personal, right? So, I like steak. I love me a good piece of steak. But the best way to make a good steak is to marinate it, let it sit in it, let it soak in the juices, the spices, so forth, before like you grill it, and then you don't just grill it like quickly. Like you take your time, like you make that steak to the best of its capabilities.
You know about this. You just made some steak.
Yeah, like you don't just throw it on the fire, take it off, and go ahead and eat it. And, like, that's how I view education, right? And I'm not sitting here saying that, you know, everybody needs a formal education. Everybody needs to go get a degree. I'm talking about me personally. Like, to me, that's one thing that they can't ever take away from you, right?
That's
because
facts.
I forgot. I don't know if it was Dr. King or Malcolm X that said this, but he was like, you know, they can enslave you physically, but no, he said that physical slavery is one thing, but if they enslave you mentally, they own you.
Shout out to Jay-Z. He came back with the nicer version. He was
No,
like,
like-
trap my body, but can't trap my mind.
Exactly, and like that's what education is, because you can lose money, you can lose your house, you can lose your cars, hell, you can lose your family. But if there's one thing that nobody can ever take away from you, is your education. And whether that's through the degree route or whether that's through getting a crash course, like the knowledge that you learn up here, that's something that nobody can ever take away from you. And so like that's what my take on it is. Like, it is a long process, but honestly and truthfully, nothing that's truly good like comes easy. Nothing that's like anything that's truly worth having, it takes time. There's a reason why they call it there's a reason why they call it a doctor. Like, it takes time to be able to be an expert in your field or expert in that area.
Right.
And that's not something that you can just do overnight.
That's facts, man.
Sure, man. Well, we thank you for coming through to the pod, man.
I
You
appreciate
speak
it.
a lot of bars, man. I view you like Morgan Freeman's character, and, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Joe Clark, you know what I
Guy
mean?
right here.
Like I said, like he would say,
appreciate it.
he used to call me crazy, but now they call me Batman. That's you right there, man.
I don't know about Batman, just call me Will.
Batman Will. How about that?
I'll take it.
But yeah,
How could people reach you on social though?
So I'm on Instagram at mte.llc, and I'm also on Facebook at William Anyu. I'm on LinkedIn at
I was just
William
gonna ask
Anyu.
you, how could people reach you for a job? You know?
I don't know if I'm in the position to hire anybody right now, but
recommendations, you know.
but yeah, man, like you can shoot me an email at anyu.willy WILLY @gmail.com, and that's the best form of communication for me is email. And you can also connect with me on Facebook and on Instagram as well. And I'm not really heavy on Twitter like that. I'm also on Snapchat at Odysseus16. And so yeah, man, holla at me.
Stuck in the Middle podcast.
Yeah,
We out.
Appreciate you coming through, bro.
Thank you.